Work more than you are paid to work and act like you're grateful for the opportunity. The contract you sign is actually very straightforward. There's no poetry in it. You give X hours of your life. The company gives Y amount of money at the end of the month. That's it. A transaction, a commercial exchange. If this kind of reflection has ever caught you off guard, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps this reach more people who are also trying to make sense of the chaos. And now we can keep going. What is funny is that most companies love capitalism until you start behaving like someone who understands how it works. That's when the speeches begin. We need people who are committed. We need people who think like owners, which usually means we need people who will do more than what they were hired to do. There's another phrase that often appears right after these speeches. This company is a family. Whenever you hear that inside an office, pay attention. That's not corporate culture. It's emotional leverage. Your real family, the one that tolerates your morning mood and knows exactly what food you hate, doesn't lay you off because the quarter was disappointing. Your family doesn't send you a message at 9:47 p.m. on a Friday asking for a quick adjustment. Your family doesn't schedule meetings at 8 in the morning after you stayed up finishing work the night before. That's not a family. That's a company trying to buy loyalty without paying for it, because your time is already purchased. It's written in the contract. What they want now is something else. They want you to feel guilty for leaving on time. They want you to check Slack before going to sleep. They want the company mission, usually something vague like creating global synergy and positive impact, to feel more important than your own life. But if we are honest, most of those missions translate to something much simpler: selling more of something. This idea of living for work isn't new. Sociologist Max Weber wrote about it more than a century ago when he described the work ethic that turns professional suffering into moral virtue, as if being exhausted at the office somehow makes you a better person. It sounds admirable on paper. The small detail is that the spiritual enlightenment rarely happens to the person doing the work. It usually shows up in the bank account of the person at the top of the company. Something strange has happened in modern work culture. Burnout has started to look like a badge of honor. Scroll through LinkedIn and you will see it. People sharing stories about how they worked themselves to the edge. And the reaction is often the same. Impressive dedication. What a journey. As if getting close to psychological collapse were proof of commitment. It almost feels like you are sleeping well and your mind still works normally. Then maybe you are not trying hard enough. That's how distorted things have become. We reached the point where mental breakdown started to look like a sign of success. But the story becomes even stranger when burnout actually happens. While you are overworking yourself, the system applauds. The moment you break, the explanation changes. Suddenly the problem isn't excessive workload. It isn't unrealistic targets. It isn't the messages arriving at 3 in the morning. It isn't constant urgency. Instead, the responsibility shifts to you. Maybe you need better time management. Maybe you need more resilience. Maybe you should improve your routine. Or the classic suggestion: have you tried meditation? The pattern is simple. The system throws you into the grinder and later criticizes the condition you came out in. Burnout rarely happens out of nowhere. In many cases, it's not a malfunction. It's the system working exactly as intended. The hustle culture doesn't want balanced employees. It wants something closer to a racing engine. An engine running at maximum speed. More laps, more fuel burned, more pressure. Until the engine eventually blows. And when that happens, you replace the engine. There's always another one ready. And someone will say, the previous one lacked passion. In the past, control was more obvious. There was a boss applying pressure from the outside. Today it works differently. We become our own supervisors. We push ourselves. We monitor ourselves. We keep demanding more. We became what people like to call entrepreneurs of ourselves. It sounds inspiring. In practice, it often means self-exploitation. Everything becomes something to optimize. Breakfast becomes productivity. The commute becomes learning time. Leisure becomes another project. Even hobbies turn into side hustles. And resting begins to feel wrong. Spending a few minutes doing nothing can produce a strange feeling of guilt. I've been there. That moment when you wake up at 4 in the morning on a Saturday and the first thing that appears in your mind is the color of a button on a slide presentation that will only happen 2 weeks from now. That isn't dedication, that's conditioning. The hustle mentality runs like software in the background of your mind. It keeps consuming attention and energy until the system overheats. And when that happens, the solution many companies offer is a short mindfulness workshop during lunch. Take a deep breath. Then go back to the spreadsheet because the deadline is approaching. It's the equivalent of putting a bandage on a serious wound. The so-called philosophy of exhaustion simply recognizes something obvious. This road leads somewhere, and the destination is not difficult to guess. Exhaustion isn't a toll along the way, it's where the road was going all along. There was a time when people did things simply because they enjoyed them. No goals, no strategy, no long-term plan, just curiosity. Drawing something random in a notebook, putting a piece of plastic on a bike wheel to make noise, learning a few chords on a guitar and playing them badly anyway. None of it had to lead anywhere. It was useless in the best possible way. Now try doing that today. Mention at a dinner that you started making poetry, for example. Give it a few minutes. Someone will eventually say something like, "That's great, you should sell it. You could open an Instagram shop. You could turn that into a business." And just like that, the atmosphere changes. The moment money enters the conversation, the original joy begins to disappear. We now live in a moment where a hobby often needs to justify itself. Enjoying something for its own sake no longer seems enough. If you run, you should document it. If you cook, you should create content about it. If you read, you should build a page reviewing books. Every activity begins to orbit around the same idea, personal branding. Passion slowly turns into a product, and the hustle culture acts like the middleman. It takes the activity that once helped you relax, the one thing that allowed you to disconnect from work, and turns it into another obligation. Now it has a new name, side hustle. It sounds ambitious. In practice, it often means working after work. The logic is simple. If you already worked 9 hours during the day, the evening should be used to build something. Build a project, build income, build a future. Resting begins to look like wasted time. I once knew someone who loved baking bread. It wasn't a business, it was a ritual. The smell of yeast, the slow process of kneading the dough, the quiet time waiting for it to rise, it helped her disconnect from a stressful job at a bank. Then people started making suggestions. You should sell this. This bread is too good to stay inside your kitchen. Then she opened an account online and began accepting orders. Soon there were deadlines, customer expectations, cost calculations. The hobby turned into production. Today she buys bread at the supermarket. She says she can't stand looking at the floor anymore. The system is clever. Once people start getting tired of the traditional 9-to-5 job, the culture found a new way to keep everyone working longer. Now the extra work comes from a different narrative. It's about dreams. It's about building something of your own. People even celebrate it. Photos at 5 in the morning with captions about gratitude and discipline. At times, it resembles a strange form of loyalty to the same system that exhausts us. The difficulty with turning passion into obligation is simple. When something you love becomes a responsibility, you lose the place where you used to rest. The refuge disappears. That's why a quiet form of rebellion today might be something very simple. Keeping a hobby that remains useless. Something that does not become content or a second career, just enjoyment. Allowing yourself to be average at something and still enjoy it. Painting a terrible painting and hanging it on the wall. Playing the guitar badly for yourself and maybe a patient dog nearby. We may need to recover the ability to spend time without turning everything into an investment. Because once your hobby needs to generate results, it stops being a hobby. It simply becomes another office. Now there is a phrase that appears everywhere in professional conversations: work-life balance. It sounds reasonable, but if you look at it carefully, the idea starts to feel strange. Your work takes at least 8 hours of the day, often more. Then the rest of your life is expected to fit into whatever time remains. Trying to balance those two sides perfectly begins to resemble a very difficult equation. The promise of balance has become one of the most repeated ideas in modern work culture, but it often works more like an ideal that keeps people chasing something they rarely reach. The message suggests that you can have everything at once: a successful career, personal development, excellent health, a social life, enough rest. In reality, carrying all those expectations at the same time can feel overwhelming. The alternative approach is not about balancing every plate in the air. It's about deciding which plates you are willing to drop, choosing a few priorities and letting the rest fall away. Sometimes the most important tool for that decision is something very simple. Limits are uncomfortable in environments that value constant availability. The language of modern work often celebrates flexibility and readiness. But those words can easily mean that someone else decides when your time belongs to them. A limit changes that dynamic. A limit can be as direct as saying no. Can you stay late today? No. Could you take on another project? No. At first, this response feels unusual, both for you and for the person hearing it. Many people are not used to encountering clear boundaries at work. That discomfort leads to another idea that is often difficult to accept: the idea of being average. Modern culture pushes the image of constant excellence. Everyone should be exceptional, outstanding, remarkable. Yet most people live somewhere around the middle of the distribution. That is simply how averages work. Being average at work does not mean being careless or incompetent. It means doing the job that was agreed upon, completing the tasks that belong to the role, working the hours that were defined, and when the workday ends, leaving the workday behind. There is no need to add extra percentages of effort beyond what was expected. Those additional 10% rarely return as higher compensation. They often return as additional expectations, more responsibility, more pressure. Sometimes the recognition arrives in symbolic forms: a title, a compliment, or an award that sits on a desk. Accepting a comfortable level of adequacy can feel liberating. It allows work to remain what it was meant to be: a way to support your life, not the definition of it. There is a quiet kind of freedom that appears when someone accepts a simple idea. Your job is just a job. It pays the bills. It occupies part of your day. But it does not have to define who you are. It does not have to be your life's passion, your identity, or your ultimate purpose. It is a tool, a means, not the destination. The anti-hustle perspective starts here. It allows you to be somewhat forgettable at work so that you can be present in the rest of your life. It replaces the pursuit of corporate excellence with something calmer, personal sufficiency. Modern culture, however, moves in the opposite direction. We live in an era fascinated with life optimization. Everything must be improved, adjusted, or measured. Sleep is optimized, food is optimized, focus is optimized. Cold showers at 5 in the morning, intermittent fasting, tracking every minute of the day. All of it meant to squeeze a little more productivity from a day that is already stretched thin. Even philosophy sometimes gets repurposed for this. People read Marcus Aurelius or Seneca and transform stoicism into a manual for tolerating corporate pressure. Acceptance becomes a way to endure unreasonable demands. But if someone were looking for a philosopher who represents the opposite spirit, they might end up with a different figure. Diogenes. Diogenes the cynic lived in a radically simple way. According to the stories about him, he owned almost nothing and spent much of his time challenging social conventions. He lived in a large storage jar in Athens. He walked through the city with a lantern during the day, claiming he was searching for an honest person, and he was known for openly mocking the customs that everyone else took seriously. There is a well-known story involving Alexander the Great. Alexander had conquered much of the known world and had become one of the most powerful figures of his time. Curious about Diogenes, he went to meet him. Alexander approached and offered him anything he wanted: wealth, status, comfort. Diogenes was resting in the sunlight. He looked up and gave a simple reply. He asked Alexander to step aside because he was blocking the sun. The scene is striking. The most powerful ruler in the world offering everything he could provide. And the response was a request for nothing more than unobstructed sunlight. In that moment, Diogenes demonstrated something unusual. The greatest form of independence might come from needing very little. Much of the hustle mentality works in the opposite direction. It constantly introduces new desires, a better position, a more impressive title, or a new purchase that signals success. Each new desire quietly asks for the same payment: more time, more effort, more energy. It promises satisfaction somewhere in the future. For many people, there comes a moment when they recognize the trade they have been making. The things they thought represented freedom may actually have become new obligations. More income can arrive together with more pressure. More status can arrive together with less personal time. At that point, the idea behind Diogenes begins to look different. The question shifts from, how can I live more, to something else. How much do I actually need? Diogenes also hints at another idea. Productivity itself can function as a trap. It is measurement designed in environments where output directly benefits someone else. The more you produce, the more valuable you appear to the system. Because of that, busyness often becomes a signal of importance. Full calendars, constant meetings, permanent urgency. Yet the real luxury may be something quieter, having time that does not need to be scheduled, an afternoon that belongs entirely to you, the ability to experience that time without guilt. In that sense, the courage shown by Diogenes became symbolic. When offered the world by Alexander, he simply asked for sunlight. He chose independence over opportunity. Modern hustle culture promotes a very specific image of success: a penthouse apartment, an expensive car, a prestigious title, large financial milestones at a young age. The path to those symbols usually follows the same instructions: wake up earlier, work longer, push harder than anyone else. Eventually, some people reach those goals, and when they do, the experience is sometimes different from what they expected. The luxury car spends most of its time in traffic. The impressive apartment can feel quiet and isolated. The executive title often brings responsibility that extends into nights, weekends, and holidays. The reward for working endlessly may simply be the opportunity to keep working. Exhaustion becomes part of the lifestyle. This realization has led many people to rethink what success might mean. Instead of focusing on status symbols, the focus moves toward autonomy, control over one's own time. From that perspective, success may look surprisingly modest. Not a penthouse, perhaps just a free afternoon in the middle of the week. Imagine a Tuesday afternoon with no obligations, not a holiday, not a long weekend, just a normal workday when you are not required to be productive. That moment contains a certain kind of freedom. You can walk through a quiet store, sit alone in a movie theater, drive somewhere simply because you feel like it. You can even take a nap in the middle of the afternoon without an alarm. In a culture organized around constant output, those moments carry unusual value. They represent time that belongs entirely to you. Many people discover this difference only after achieving what they once considered success. Someone may hold an impressive title and earn a high income, yet remain tied to a schedule that controls every hour. Another person may earn less, but retain the ability to decide how their days unfolds. From a distance, the second life can appear much richer. This perspective is not about rejecting work or ambition. It is about recognizing another dimension of wealth. True wealth may involve needing less and controlling more of your own time. In the end, success might not mean appearing on the cover of a magazine. It might mean something quieter. Your name simply does not appear in urgent email threads. You sleep well, and when you look at your watch, it is not to check the next meeting. It is to notice how much time is still left in the day.